Welcome to the Game of Life podcast, where we bring you inspiring softball stories, insightful tips from coaches and players, and explore how the game transcends its boundaries to become a metaphor for life. Whether you're a sports enthusiast, a casual fan, or someone just looking for inspiration, you're in for a treat. We'll unravel the tales that go beyond the scoreboard. Discover how perseverance and hard work on the field translates into resilience in your daily challenges. Learn about teamwork, leadership, and the unwavering spirit that fuels success, not just in sports, but in the game of life. Well, season 2 has arrived. We made it through the first year. That was a lot of fun. I mean, like people say, getting started is the hardest part most of the time. And the second hardest part's staying consistent with your actions. So, new year, it was nice having you home. Uh, what do you think, Allie?
Yeah, it's been so much fun and just, even seeing the feedback we got from season one and, just people letting us know what episodes were their favorite, what hit home with them. I think it's been a really rewarding process and in the process of it all, just getting to talk to you and getting to talk to all the guests every week, it's been super fun. So we're excited for what's to come in season two. And speaking of being consistent, that's actually going to be our topic tonight. So we figured it'd be a good one as we start season two, start the new year. So with that, I guess I'll turn it over to you for your opening thoughts about what you think of when you hear the word consistency or someone tells you to be consistent.
Well, it's simple. It's my favorite phrase, but it's the hardest thing to do because you literally have to do it every day for the most part. And if you're consistent with working out, it doesn't mean all your workouts are 100%. It just means you show up 100% of the time. You're consistent with practice and hitting and what you eat. If everybody was consistent, there'd probably be no such thing as New Year's resolutions because the new year should be about reflecting on what you did good and bad last year and improving it. But it should be the same process. It shouldn't be like all of a sudden, I'm going to take 500 swings a day, do yoga 4 times a week, and go to the gym 6 days a week. And then that's where burnout comes in. Consistent can sometimes just be the smallest actions done all the time.
When I think to me too, going off your point, consistency has a lot to do with setting realistic goals. Because if I set a goal that's going to be super far out of my reach, let's say I want to lose 30 pounds in the next week, that's not a realistic goal. And it's going to be harder for me to be consistent because I'm not going to see the result I want and I'm going to feel like I failed. So I think setting goals that, are going to be rewarded by your consistency is going to set you up for success to be consistent too.
Now, when you say goals, one thing I personally have problems with is I'll have even my students, not necessarily players, do vision boards of what they want to accomplish. I have a hard time with statistics, playing time, because I feel like you can't control all that stuff. What do you think about setting goals that deal with those two categories before we move on?
The categories of, say them
Playing
again.
time and
Oh,
statistics.
yeah. So I think that's tough because statistics you can't really control no matter what. You can say that you can work hard, but I know for the game of softball in general, right? Like I could hit line drives 10 times in a row and they could be right at people and get caught. That doesn't mean I'm not working toward my goal. And I think when it comes to goals, for me, what's been, helpful is you set them in the long run, right? It's a process and there's going to be ups and downs throughout that process. But if your goals are so short term that you hit a downturn and that means you don't reach your goal, I don't think the time frame is necessarily right for them. So I think that's tough for the statistics piece. Playing time wise is tough too, because I think that one's a little bit more controllable, but to go into a season saying my goal is to start every single game that we play, there's just too many variables in that to have total control over it. There's injury, there's better matchups, right? If you're in a sport where, maybe you're not the best matchup that day. If you're a pitcher in softball, you're not going to pitch every single game. That's an unrealistic goal.
Yeah, I think you can control how you attack pitches. You can control contact, to some extent. You can control being the most energetic at practice. And I
Yeah.
think I think those things will lead to other types of successes. But I just
Yeah.
like to touch base with that because I know with all the I teach high school seniors and then obviously with the athletes I help coach, they usually go right to those two goals and then also winning like a title,
Yeah.
which I'm fine with that being your the goal every year, but it shouldn't be there has to be so many other realistic goals to get there.
And I think consistency too, there's goals you can have control over. Instead of, everybody wants to win a title, and that's a great goal, but maybe instead of saying we're going to win the title, say I'm going to bring consistent energy to practice every day because I can control that. Like that's in no one else's hands but mine, and that could lead me to a title. Or, I'm going to make sure I hit 6 out of 7 days a week. I'm going to like stuff that's in my control that's going to help me reach that goal of a title. But I think when you put those big, big goals in your head and kind of lose sight of the consistency it's gonna take to get you there, I think setting smaller goals that seem, I guess, more achievable in the short term to help you reach that long-term goal are gonna help you be consistent.
Yeah, you just came up with a couple good ones. I mean, there, effort, it could be as simple as effort in all you do. You know, one of our favorite quotes is how you do anything is how you do everything. And
Yeah.
that seems very convenient to people until they are held accountable to it. They get called out on it. They're having a bad day. They don't feel good. I mean,
Right.
you still can try your best for how you feel.
Yeah.
And you know, we have a lot of stories. We brought a lot of people on. We have other stories we haven't told, but these topics that we're talking about, and even like consistency, if you don't buy in, it doesn't matter because consistency has nothing to do with how you perform most days or how you practice most days. It's the days you don't want to show up
Yeah.
or you don't feel like being there because that's real. To say you don't, to say you
Yeah.
100% feel like being there all the time, you're not
Mhm.
being honest with yourself. But it's just like adversity. Any of these words, if it's, you have to really remember the days you don't want to practice it are the most important days to practice it.
Yeah. And I think too, one of the big things with consistency that gets overlooked is if you just show up, you're being consistent in some way. Like sometimes showing up is the hardest part, and my mind immediately goes to the gym. Like I went to a 5:30 gym class this morning, and in the middle of it, the trainer was like, "You guys did the hard part. You showed up here." Like we're all a little crazy because you just got up at 4:45 to come to the gym. So this part's not the hard part. You already did that. And I think when it comes to goals, like showing up is half 75% of the battle sometimes of just being there to then set yourself up for success.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, it could be showing up to an evening class too, right? Like
Yeah,
sometimes,
yes, yeah,
no,
yeah.
no, and because sometimes I think people think the only way to do it is to get up early. I'm a big fan. I think it's easier to be consistent early on in the day because when you wake up, there's especially that early, there's not much else going on. So it's easy to have all the time be you time. When you wait till later in the day, it could be a weather issue, it could be a accident on the road. It could be, if you're not old enough to drive, your parents get hauled up somewhere. So yes, it's easier to be consistent early on.
Well,
So
and
kudos.
my mind kind of jumps to too for young softball players out there. Let's say you're, in seventh grade right now and you have a goal of playing varsity softball someday. If there's open gyms, show up. Yeah, every single one. Just keep showing up because that's going to lead you to consistency too. Because I think one of the things that frustrates me is when people say they have goals, but then they don't really work toward them necessarily. It's just this idea on the back of their mind. And I heard someone say the other day, in terms of the new year, like, well, you have to make changes to your life, or it's not going to be a new year, it's just going to be another year. So I think that's kind of important to keep in your mind too, of when you have these goals, what is your plan of consistency? What's your plan of attack to actually walk toward them instead of wait 6 months and then try to leap to get there?
Okay, so let's break it down by year as far as softball and consistency. You're in seventh grade. What are the things you can control to play varsity softball someday?
How much you practice, how hard you work, what travel team you're on, are you in good shape? Are you playing other sports? What kind of teammate are you? Are you having fun? I think at that point it's just trying to get better at your craft, like trying to become a better softball player. I know some schools it's different in every state, but you can go to open gyms. You can try out for JV, instead of just trying out for modified. Even if you don't think you're going to make it, just try out. You never know, just show up. I think play up as much as you can. Even if you're going to get beat, it's going to make you better. So I think working hard, challenging yourself, and then focusing on the intangibles too.
And then as you get into eighth grade, same type of thing.
I think same type thing, eighth grade. Stay open to new positions. Learn as many positions as you can play. If you're in seventh grade and you're telling me you play one position, I don't believe you. That's the wrong answer. So I think that's like a seventh grade. See, here's my analogy. In seventh grade, when someone says, I'm gonna be a what veterinarian. I'm just gonna use an example. We kind of as adults are like, yeah, okay, like we'll see. So why is it not the same for softball positions or whatever position you play? Like, why don't we question anybody saying, I'm only a point guard, I'm only a forward, I'm only a setter, I'm only a second baseman. Why don't we question that as much as we question other stuff? Because I don't know.
Well, it's funny. You give me nine players that are truly consistent, you know, in
Mhm,
all their actions. And I think you could find a place for all of them on the field.
mhm,
Obviously, pitching being the lone exception, you know.
mhm.
So to pigeonhole yourself and say you only play one position, that's never, ever made sense to me. And, and again, part of being consistent, working out, flexibility, stretching. I hear so much negative self-talk in the classroom and on the field by younger players that are like, I can't touch my toes. I can't stretch, or I can't do this move in practice. What do you mean you can't? If you're consistent with the effort, you'll learn it. Like no
Mhm.
one's asking you, to invent a rocket engine. You're just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
here, I showed you this drill and we coaches anywhere explain the importance of it. With some consistency, you can get it. But that's just one microcosm of how if you don't live a consistent lifestyle, you'll just give up on things like that and then it starts building.
And I think one thing it's important to keep in mind is it's super easy to make excuses, and I'm going to oversimplify this, but I think being consistent is a choice, and I think being inconsistent is also a choice. So we can make all the excuses you want. I do it too sometimes, right? I'm coaching late. I'm like, oh, I was going to go to the gym, but I just can't. When really, every time I get up and every time I show up, I'm happier that I did it. So I think it's a choice. And one quote I heard recently that I really like, and again, oversimplifying it, but it's just like to plant a seed in our mind. If you're not changing something, you're choosing it. So everything in our life that we complain about all the time, at the end of the day, if we're going to oversimplify it, if we really were so unhappy with something, we would change it. And I think that's super interesting. And I'm curious your thoughts on that. And obviously, we need to give everybody grace, and sometimes you need to rest your body, but for things, I've done it before. I complain about something over and over and over again, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, do something." You
You
know?
know, one thing I did when you and your sister were in travel, it's fun. Listen, any travel parent out there is going to understand this statement. At some point, it's just as much fun because the people you get to hang out with in the hotel at night as the
Yeah,
games are. And you
yeah,
develop that fun bunch of friends to talk, maybe have a drink, do whatever. Everybody's different. But I told myself when you were at a young age, I'm going to go to bed within a half hour of when you guys go to bed. And I got up every day and I ran or walked or did something, usually before you guys were up.
yeah.
And I held myself consistent to that because there's two reasons. When you're consistent, it's very difficult for the people around you that are building something with you to not follow your lead. And that was the real reason we were where we were, right?
Yeah,
And then it became such a choice. There wasn't one time ever that I felt bad, no matter how tired I was in the morning afterwards. So if
yeah.
you can, that's why going back to the morning a little is important. If you can do something early on. I know there's that analogy, oh, make your bed because it's the first choice of the day. I'm not a bed maker, so I'm never, ever, ever gonna fall for that. But the whole point behind it is if you have a task that you can complete early on, you've already stacked a gain before anything else hits you that day.
Yeah.
And
And
I think
what do you tweet every day?
be consistent. It's funny, I stopped doing that. Well, I always did it because it was a reminder to me, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And it got to the point. I didn't need that reminder. It's just ingrained in my head.
No, but it was so cool for everyone listening out there. Like every day he would just tweet, be consistent, and people would like it. And when they'd see him, they'd be like, oh my gosh, I don't know how you remember to do that every day and stuff. Like it was something so small and it was just kind of really cool. And then how about your running walking streak too there? You want
Oh
to
my
share that?
gosh. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had that forever.
It was, do you have a number? I don't even know.
I'll have to look back on my phone, but it got so bad. I mean, we were traveling all night once coming home from something. I mean, your mom and I, you
Yeah.
guys were older, and we got home at like 10:30 at night and it was pitch dark and I just ran around the block 4 times with my pedometer,
It
to
was,
make
and
sure.
what was you'd either run or walk a mile every
Run
day,
or
like
walk.
excuse. Yeah.
I would often do more, but I
Yeah.
had to do. And I started a streak last year too until we decided to start the business we started.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like it wasn't about the mile then because I was getting up even earlier to build, you know.
Well, I feel
So
like half the
I
fun
was
of,
getting my
yeah.
workout in, but now you've inspired me. I'm starting it tomorrow now.
Well, I feel like even half the fun of it is proving to yourself that you can do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part that maybe some people miss, but I love it is you get done with a week and you're like, wow, that I'm really tired, but I did it. And that just kind of proves to you and over again. And then that's a base block for you to think back about when you're struggling again. You know, you can do it because you already did it. So I think consistency is kind of a building block for that work ethic too.
Yeah, and when you don't feel it, it's sort of like feel like doing it. It's sort of like a little bit of built-in adversity. I mean, adversity is going to happen regardless. But if you kind of create it artificially, when it really happens, you understand you'll get through it. I tell the kids at school, and I mean, I grew up, I wanted to be a pro golfer, went to college, played on a couple mini tours, and real quick realized I'm not a pro golfer. So that's an epic fail, right? But I used all those disciplines and habits
Yeah.
to want to change careers and sacrifice myself for 6 months with long nights and then
Yeah.
build a putting green in the backyard and swim across the lake at one time and do the mile streak with you and now start a bit like it, if you have those disciplines, especially the discipline of being consistent, and then it creates a little bit of being uncomfortable in adversity, it's really just building a foundation to eventually be successful in something you do.
Yeah.
More than just the sport. More than just the sport.
Yeah, and I mean, circling all the way back to where we started, consistency as progress through high school and stuff, because that's where we were when we started all this. I think
Yeah,
we
yeah,
ended at
yeah,
nine
yeah.
thirty, but I feel like as you go, it's more just uh, what kind of leader are you gonna be? It's just all that general stuff, and I think the one that comes to mind that I want to talk about is so many kids out there say they want to play a sport in college. How consistent are you with progress toward that goal, right? Because to me, you have a goal of, okay, I want to be a starter on varsity. And you work toward that almost every day. You go to practice, you go to individual coaches, trainers, strength conditioning, all this stuff to reach that goal. And you do it at least every day or every other day. So if you want to get recruited or you have a goal in mind that you want to reach, you should be doing something at least every week to reach that goal, right? Where I think sometimes it kind of gets slipped to the back burner because it's not screaming in your face all the time. It's one of those like, back of the mind goals for some people. And then 6 months go down the line and it's kind of oh crap, am I too late? What am I going to do? Because there wasn't any action taken toward it.
Well, yeah, that's one of the things I wrote down when it came to getting private lessons.
Hmm.
Uh, what you might hit or have a pitching lesson once a week with somebody, or
Hmm.
even people that go to trainers, maybe that's 2 or 3 times a week, and that's
Hmm.
fantastic. But being consistent doesn't mean going to that every single week. It means taking notes while you're there, practicing it in a consistent level, and then coming back and seeing that coach should be just looking to see where you are each week and tweaking you. That
Yeah.
coach isn't going to be the reason you go play or go to the level you play. And that's very common with people.
Yeah. And I mean, as a hitting instructor myself, like we shouldn't have to be going over the same stuff for 3 weeks in a row. It should be, I do this with every single one of the girls I hit with. They come in and I say, have you hit since you saw me last? Like they're gonna laugh at these questions if they listen to this. Have you hit since you saw me last? What do you want to work on tonight? How's your swing feel? And if they tell me I don't know, that's kind of like my way of them saying I haven't hit since I saw you last. And to me, it's I'm giving you tools to help you, build your craft and get better. This isn't the only softball that, should be happening throughout the week. It's when you leave here, every time you hit until you see me again, it's got to be focused on the things we talked about so that next time you come in, we take a step up the stairs and we keep climbing instead of just we're stuck on the same step for a month.
It'd be like going to Lowe's or Home Depot and buying all the supplies for a house and then wondering why you don't have a house when you come home.
Yeah.
Right? You've got
Yeah.
to assemble it, go through the challenges and the ups and downs and the failures and understand what you're trying to do. And then you go back there for more advice, more supplies. That's what the players should be doing when they have lessons. If not, you're literally wasting your money. It might make you feel good that day, but
Mhm.
you're not building anything consistent.
Agreed. And one thing I think would be fun to touch on for the new year for the last little bit here is, I guess, kind of best practices for creating goals for yourself, whether that's in life or in your sport. I'm sure you've heard of the like SMART framework or terminology for making
Yeah.
goals. I don't know, we can start there and kind of go through it and maybe share our thoughts on it, or if you want to just say your first
No, go
thought.
ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so for anyone who hasn't heard the SMART terminology before, it's something I've kind of come to a lot that I'm sure you have as well at certain points in your life or even athletic career. So it stands for SMART or specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So I use them at work now. I've used them in college. I use this framework growing up in athletics, just kind of a framework for us to be able to draft up goals for ourselves. So I guess we'll start with that first one, specific. What does that mean to you? How specific do we get?
Well, it,
Does it need to be, I need to bat 323, my averaging should be 323?
no, to me, specific means having a plan every time I come to the plate,
Yeah.
right? And knowing my opponent. And if I fail, at least I went up with a plan. So in sports, to me, specific means a plan.
I would agree with that.
And as far as measurable, I mean, I think you'll be a better player if you measure how many times you make contact or advance a runner than how many times the ball hits the ground before someone catches it. To me, that's the ultimate form of measurement, not how many hits you have.
I think you need to, yeah, to me, I think measurable is a tricky one because you have to be careful because it's so easy, especially as a young girl or young boy or whoever, if you hear the word measurable, you're like, oh, stats. And to me, measurable is kind of like, okay, is it easily definable to me what a success or a failure was? So to me, like playing basketball, let's say, right? Had a, I'm trying to think of basketball. Let's say I didn't score 20 points, but I had 12 assists and my goal was to have 20 points. Like maybe my goal should have been, did I have a positive impact on the game today? Like, do I feel that I was a good teammate? Did I help our team win? To me, that's kind of more measurable than I need to have 20 points a game or I failed. So I think I'm curious your thoughts on that too.
Well, no, I mean, it just means being productive, and
Yeah, that's sort of what I was looking.
you can't be the most productive person every time. So I don't care if you lose 10-0 or if you win 10-0 or well, there's a walk off. I mean, now we're back to softball, not basketball.
Right, right.
When you go back and reflect on your performance, you can't win them all, but you can always be productive.
Yeah. And I
And
think
it might have been giving the on deck batter a tip of a pitch you just saw because you went 0 for 4 that day. It's just the way it goes. But you have to get that in your head. What did I do productive?
exactly. Yeah. And I think going back to the specific one too, I know we're bouncing back and forth, but I'm just thinking of a life example, right? Like I could easily see someone's goal being, I'm going to get promoted at work. Okay, how are you going to do that? Is
Right.
kind of specific. Are you going to take on more? Are you going to go outside the scope of your role? Are you going to try to be more of a leader? Like that's the specific piece. Another example, so many people, why is the gym the busiest it is the first week of January? Everyone says, I'm going to go to the gym more. Okay, do you have a schedule to go of how you're going to go to the gym? Another example, I'm going to practice softball more. Awesome. When are you going to go? Like, what's the schedule? So I think, specific is that's kind of how I think about that one.
Yeah. No.
Okay, so you
What
got
about the?
specific, measurable, and then achievable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm torn on this one because
Me
I
too.
want my friend Cam F. Awesome that I've had into town to speak to kids, and uh, he's had a fantastic career. He bucks the system on this one a little bit because he says you need to set your goals that are so high and almost unachievable that when on your way down you'll hit all the low bearing fruit. Like,
Yeah,
you want to win a state title. Okay. I mean, only one team can do that, but if you work your butt off, you might win a sectional or district title. And that's
yeah.
that's still a successful year. So I'm never against people setting their goals super high, even if they're semi not achievable. But the more out of reach they look, it's easier to challenge somebody's consistent effort, if that makes sense.
I 100% agree. I think I almost think of them as like stretch goals or reach goals. So I almost think it's important to have, a relevant goal or one that you think, or not relevant, achievable goal that you think you're going to be able to hit, and then maybe a stretch goal on top of that. So I do think, this does come in, for example, let's say you're in the fall of your senior year saying you want to go play softball at the University of Alabama. Okay, that's not maybe necessarily achievable at this time. So I think it's a balance for sure. And I think you have to find that happy medium of, okay, I need a goal that's going to push me. Like, there's not 100% chance I'm going to get there. Maybe there's a
Right.
25% chance I'm going to get there. It's not 100 and it's not zero. It's kind of
Well,
how
no,
I look
and
at it.
and that's the thing. If you're in sixth or seventh grade and that was your goal to play at
Yeah.
Alabama, and you actually do everything in your power to try to
Yes.
get there, if you don't go to Alabama, you're going to land somewhere pretty good.
100%.
And
100%.
that's so I think we mean kind of the same thing. What do you think about relevant?
I think you need to make sure your goal aligns with what you actually want. So I guess I'll use a softball example again, go figure. But let's say you want your team to win a state title. Okay. Is a more relevant goal for you to be the best team player you can be or to bat 330? Like, to me, you kind of have to think, okay, maybe you can do a team goal and a personal goal, but to me, relevancy kind of means what's the big picture and how can I get myself there? Because one thing I always tried to do, or I, tell my players to do now, is make a personal goal, make a team goal, and then make like an intangible goal. And they're all relevant in different ways, but maybe they stem up to the same overarching goal, right? Maybe, I'm going to go back to the promotion at work. You want to get a promotion at work. Okay, this is how I'm going to do that. Like, personally, this is what I need to do to improve myself. How am I gonna inspire my team to do this? And at the end of the day, how is this all gonna make my company better and my team better? So it almost has to be like this web of goals building up to something that's super relevant, but there can be branches off of it that are maybe more personal or more team.
I like that. And what about the last one?
Time bound. Tell me your thoughts on time bound. I'm curious.
Well, I mean, when you say time bound, are you thinking like what age you start these goals or what point in your life are you?
I'm thinking if I make a goal, do I give myself 3 years to do it or 6 months?
Wow.
So yeah.
So, so with
Back
certain
to consistency we go.
with big ticket items in life, why does there have to be a timeline on it? Like you mentioned, they get promoted, or you
Some people
mentioned,
will never start it.
yeah, you mentioned own a company. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, anybody mentions that. So for time bound, I just did this activity with students that I make them come up with a vision list, and it's got to be all big ticket items.
Mhm.
Okay. And I have them, I don't know if they all do it. I can never prove it, but I want them to put it somewhere where they can see it every day because you only get one life, right?
Yeah,
So if something's that important to you, why even put a time on it? Now,
right.
that's why I say big ticket items, because if your goal is to play varsity softball and you're 22 years
It is a
old,
little time
like,
bound. Yeah.
yeah, like, I mean,
Mhm.
so, uh, if you think, if you're consistent, you're not going to reach all your goals, but I think you'll reach all your goals that aren't time bound. So
Well,
I'm
I
kind of,
agree.
kind of changing that a little because most people, when they give up on a goal, they don't see the big picture of how much working towards that goal probably helped them towards something else they really want later in life.
Well, and I think it's important to keep in mind someone who's truly consistent probably doesn't need a time bound. They don't need like a time goal because they're going to do it anyway. But there's a lot of people out there struggling with it, and we all struggle with it at some point. And my idea of time bound is kind of like, okay, and the next year, I'm going to achieve this, and here's what I'm going to do every month to achieve it. I feel like for some people, putting a time on it says, okay, that means I need to make progress, like a walk to it until then, where there's a lot of people out there who maybe struggle with consistency or motivation or discipline, who, if they never put a time on it, they're never
Right.
going to start it. So I think it just depends on the person you are.
No, and that's, I mean, if your goal is to make varsity softball in ninth grade and you're consistent and you make it in 10th grade, that's not a fail, right?
Right.
If your goal is to lose 30 pounds in a year and you lose 25, that's not a
Right.
fail.
Not a fail.
But
Yeah.
but it does add a bit of accountability to your consistency because
Yeah.
you can show up every day to the gym, but if you sit in the corner and sleep,
Right.
you got to have something attached to that. So no, I,
Right.
I I think this is good stuff. And I think people don't talk about it enough either. Like
Mhm.
it, everybody says work in quiet, be humble, show your gains 6 months later. I get all that, but if you're not sharing what you're trying to accomplish with other people, uh, I think you're less likely to do it. That's just my opinion.
Well, one of the best ways to stay consistent is speaking out crazy goals into the world, because then
Yes.
other people are like, "Oh, how's that going?" And you're like, "Oh crap, I haven't started that yet." I know that's something we do. I'm like, "I've been thinking about doing this," and then all of a sudden people are asking me about it, and that's a way to hold me accountable to be consistent too, because now I know other people are going to be asking me.
And it really opens up a lot of relationships because when you're talking about things, you find out real quick if people are in your corner or not. And it's a little harder when you're younger in school. There's only so many people that potentially you can be around,
Yeah,
but it's still okay because in the travel world, you have lots of other people that you don't see every day. You might see once a week or twice a week, and I
yeah.
think it's okay talking about them in a humble way. You know,
Yeah.
that's a
And
whole
I,
nother topic.
Well, and one of the, I think it's important to keep in mind too, and I've had moments in my life like this. If I'm like really, really struggling that hard to be consistent with something, I have to ask myself how much I want it, because maybe it's not a priority for me, and that's why I'm having trouble being consistent with it. So, I mean, I think about, I ended up changing my major. We can get around to that another time. But when I was studying and doing stuff, I wasn't being super consistent with it. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, I don't really like this. Maybe that's why. So I
Well,
think it's important to have
no,
moments
no,
like,
that's a bit good way to end the podcast. That circling back, we're talking about ways to be consistent, and if you keep failing to be consistent, then question if you even want this.
yeah, yeah,
And and that's good because sometimes I think when it comes to that, people like everything about maybe traveling or everything about going to school except actually taking the test or putting in the work
right.
or being, they like all the stuff that comes with what you're trying to accomplish. You don't like the actual work. So all right, hey, next 2 weeks we're gonna have guests on. So we kind of stick to that 2 on 1 off formula. Gives us
Yeah.
time to catch up as well. So
We
any
got a lot of
closing,
fun stuff coming in season 2, so stay
yeah,
tuned.
any closing thoughts, or you think we solved the world's problems with consistency?
Solved. I'm getting up to go to the gym tomorrow. I'm speaking it into existence, so I can
All right,
be
I'll be
consistent.
walking in the frigid cold weather with my
Yeah.
coffee. All
All
right,
right.
see you, Allie.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Bye.